What do you think of when you hear the word physiology? It's probably not quite as intuitive as anatomy might have been. Physiology is just the study of how we work, the function, what goes on inside of us. It's a very active type of study. It's not just naming parts. There's still some complicated vocabulary, but it's action. It's full of verbs, and it's what we do. So all quarter long, you've been studying physiology, but mostly at a cellular level. What do cells do? They make ATP out of food. They perform hydrolysis of macromolecules, break them down into smaller pieces. They build up, synthesize things like protein out of DNA. They make more DNA. Cells reproduce by mitosis to repair body parts. The entire body goes through a life cycle of meiosis, fertilization, and then mitosis to produce new life in reproductive physiology. So physiology spans anything that an organism does. One other kind of unappreciated thing that happens sort of in the background, and it's sort of going on largely inside your brain, and the subconscious part is the regulation, right? Just like when you drive, you don't think about much other than braking, turning, accelerating. That's the basic parts of driving, that and directions. You don't give a whole lot of thought to how warm is the engine. Is the oil circulating properly? In just the same way, we don't think about that with us. Is my heart beating fast enough? Do I have enough oxygen? How is my blood sugar doing? Am I still warm or have I gone cold? Of course, we stay warm. That's homeostasis. That's keeping things steady as she goes so that we can work properly. It's kind of a foundational support to all the other important physiology that goes on in the body. And that's the one I want to dive into a little deeper here.
Homeostasis. Remember, homo or homeo means the same or steady, and stasis is a state. Right? The reason we'd have to gain or lose heat is to keep the body temperature stable. So over time, if we were to look at that, we want the body to be at about 37 degrees Celsius. And we can tolerate a little bit higher and a little bit lower and still have normal body function, but we need to keep it pretty steady over time. And so this is a little bit about how the body works together, scaling up even more, looking at how different organs work together to maintain homeostasis for not only body temperature, but salt, water balance, calcium levels, etc. Well, just like your body maintains temperature, your house probably does as well. So in the winter, we set the thermostat, looking up here, and there's a process for this. And you say you want the house to be at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, of course. Then the little thermostat knows that. That's what we call the control center. And if it gets too low, then it sends a signal down to the heater, which produces heat. And the temperature of the room now warms up. And let's say it had been something like 72. And now that we've produced heat, we got it back up to 75. And the control center now says, hey, everything is great. Let's turn that back off so that the heater won't keep cranking up temperature. We need that loop to be completed. We can't just say, hey, it's cold, heat it up, and never feedback, never stop. Feedback is important, right? Businesses ask for your feedback. They want to know if something is going wrong and what they're doing right. Let's take this plant, for example. You look at it and say, boy, that needs water. And so you turn on the hose. And if you forget about it, if you're not watching to see that the ground is wet, then you might leave that water on and have a big flood. You didn't get that feedback. You didn't close the loop and say enough is enough. So we don't want to get ourselves into trouble by trying to fix things. We need that feedback. Well, I'm going to ask you to draw a couple of these negative feedback loops for yourself for blood glucose and for body temperature.
All right, well, that negative feedback loop flowchart is a nice model It gives us a good basic outline of what happens, but it doesn't work for everything. Don't force it. You know when you learn in English the 5-paragraph essay? Well, not all writing is a 5-paragraph essay, is it? You ever read a novel, looked at a textbook? They're not a 5-paragraph essay. So although it's a good general model, it's just a guideline.
When you look this up, then you're going to find diagrams that look like this, but I really want you to put it in the other format. One, that's the way I'll test you on it, but two, I just want you to practice knowing what is what. So let's practice for blood calcium, and let's ignore this top part up here and just look at the bottom. Here we have the Goldilocks zone, homeostasis, just right, blood calcium. But if it falls too low, then it's sensed by the parathyroid glands, which release parathyroid hormone, which signal these organs to then adjust blood calcium and bring it back up to normal. All right, so how do we put that in this format? Well, first, I know the sensor, the first organ was parathyroid gland. Remember, each of these boxes is an organ. Next, the control center. Let's see. The next one I remember was small intestines. Is that what you remember? Let's try it. Nope, it's the parathyroid. Well, okay, this makes sense. Because the control center, remember, it's the thinker. It's the one that says, this is my set point. Is that okay or not? And so when you're dealing with glands, then a lot of times the gland is both receptor and the control center. With the nervous system, it works a little bit differently. And so if you're looking at blood glucose and you're concentrating on the pancreas, then it's going to look kind of like this. So this would be the pancreas instead, but not true for body temperature. And then remember, if that was the case, if it sensed that maybe the blood calcium was 8, then it's going to send out parathyroid hormone, and that's going to go to the effectors, the organs that will do something about it. That was the bones. They release calcium from their stores and increase it. Kidneys, they're signaled by parathyroid hormone to basically not lose any calcium, so keep it from being filtered out into the urine, so it keeps it the same. At least it keeps it from going down. And then the small intestines work harder to absorb calcium. So net effect, calcium levels go up. Maybe we're back to 9. Mission accomplished. Parathyroid hormone says, or parathyroid gland says, okay, we're all good. I'm going to stop releasing parathyroid hormone, and things will return to normal. Over time, if we were to graph this, which of course we'd love doing, if you looked at this over time, and this were blood calcium levels, and just right, this is about 9. What we were just doing is, if it went down a little bit, then we release parathyroid hormone, which would bring it back up, right? And maybe something else took it up a little bit, we could bring it back down. And over time, homeostasis keeps things pretty normal. But if we get too far out of whack, then we're going to be in the hospital somewhere. And blood calcium disorders are really quite serious.
Well, negative feedback loops are very useful and really, in a way, kind of boring, right? They just keep things nice and steady. If something starts going up, then the body brings it back down, just so it all stays in that Goldilocks zone of normalness. But there are a few instances when we don't want homeostasis. And there, we might use a different kind of loop, connections between different organs that kind of feed back on each other. And this one is a positive feedback loop, where if it starts going up, then the positive feedback says, keep doing that. Go up more, and go up more, and go up more, until that thing is gone. And then we kind of drop back down into normalcy. Think of, and these aren't always real pretty, but vomiting is an example. You feel a little sick to your stomach. And that nausea, for whatever reason, makes you a little more nauseated. And that makes you a little more nauseated until you just... But then you feel better, right? I mean, it's gone. It's done. And And so that's an example of a positive feedback loop where you feel more and more and more and more nauseated until you throw up, and then you're done. Mission accomplished. Not homeostasis, but a very important role in the body.
Just to wrap up on physiology here, not everything is about homeostasis, and positive feedback loops certainly aren't. They have the same basic idea and format, multiple organs working together to accomplish a job, but it's not homeostasis in that sense. So normally, if it was a negative feedback loop and the sensor sensed some factor was increasing, then the effector would then decrease it. But in a positive feedback loop, it's going to move in the same direction. And so instead of homeostasis, instead of this, you're going to get increase, 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 increase. That's not homeostasis at all. So there aren't a lot of times that the body would actually use this. But one classic example is childbirth. Here you have the baby in utero, pushes on the cervix when contractions start, and that sends a signal to the brain that releases oxytocin. That's the signal. This would be the control center, by the way. Cervix is the sensor. And then oxytocin signals the uterus, right? These muscles right here, to contract even harder. So this is what we talk about going into labor and contractions. Well, obviously that contraction is going to cause more pressure against the cervix, which causes the brain to release more oxytocin. And so we keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger contractions until the baby comes out, and then things fall back to normal and it's all good. So not a real common type of thing, and it's not about homeostasis, but different organs can work together to accomplish different jobs.